The message was not meant to travel far, that it was weak, broken, and filled with static. The transmitters on the planet Keller were old, damaged by bombardment and fire. Power was failing. Cities were already silent. The people who sent the signal did not believe anyone would answer. Still, they sent it. From deep underground shelters, surrounded by fear and smoke, Keller's leaders gathered around a flickering screen. Outside, the sky burned. Enemy ships moved like cold stars, precise and uncaring. Every defense satellite was gone. Every fleet ship had been destroyed or captured. Keller was a peaceful world. They had believed in laws, councils, and treaties. They believed that if a civilization followed the rules of the galaxy, someone would protect them. They were wrong. The enemy was the Varn Collective, a species known for logic without mercy. They did not negotiate with the weak. They did not accept surrender. When they decided a world had no value, they erased it. Keller had been judged. The message began recording. A thin, trembling voice spoke in careful galactic common. "This is Keller. We are under attack. Our defenses have fallen. Our civilians are trapped. If anyone receives this, we ask for help, please." The speaker paused. In the background, distant explosions shook the room. Dust fell from the ceiling. "We do not have much time." The message ended. It was sent again and again, through every known channel, through emergency bands, trade routes, and diplomatic frequencies. The signal spread outward like a dying breath. Eventually, it reached the Galactic Council. The council chamber was vast and bright. Powerful beings sat in floating seats of light and metal. They watched the message with calm eyes and steady hearts. Some showed mild interest. Most showed none. Aurelian strategists calculated losses. Too high. Zell, the economists, saw no profit. Others feared provoking the Varn. One by one, they spoke. "It is unfortunate. We regret the loss. We cannot intervene." The final vote was quick. Keller was declared non-critical. The message was archived outside the council. The galaxy continued as normal. Trade moved. Wars ended and began elsewhere. No one spoke Keller's name, but the signal kept traveling. It slipped through forgotten relays. It passed through abandoned listening posts. It moved along paths no one had cleaned or updated in centuries. Old paths, dangerous paths. Finally, it reached a system marked with red warning symbols and ancient notes. Sol System Planet. Earth classification, Extreme Death World. Human listening station picked it up at 3:17 Earth time. At first, the operator thought it was noise. The signal was damaged, emotional, and inconsistent. But when the translation software finished processing, the room went silent. The words played again. "If anyone receives this, please." A human officer leaned closer to the screen. She had seen war before. She had heard fear before. This was not a trick. This was a dying world. Within minutes, the message was sent up the chain of command. Admirals, generals, and leaders gathered. Some were tired. Some were angry. Some were afraid. They knew the Varn. Everyone did. "They are stronger than us," someone said. "This could start a larger war," another warned. "We have no obligation," a politician argued. Room filled with debate. Then a quiet voice spoke from the back. A veteran commander, scarred and old, looked at the frozen image of Killer's burning sky. "They asked for help," he said simply. Silence followed. Humans had grown on a world that punished weakness. Storms tore cities apart. Diseases killed millions. Nature itself fought them every day. Survival had taught them something the galaxy never understood. Pain recognized pain. The commander continued. "No one answered them," he said. "That means they're alone." He looked around the room, and we know what that feels like. The screen showed the last frame of the message again. a trembling voice, a burning world, a plea sent into the dark. Far away, beneath a violent blue sky, Earth made a decision. The Deathworlders were listening. The room on Earth was tense. Screens flickered with the failing images of killer cities. Smoke rose in every frame. Tiny lights that once marked homes were gone. The people were terrified. Their world was being erased. And now the question hovered in the air. Do we intervene? Admirals argued. Analysts ran endless calculations. Politicians weighed risks against strategy. The Varn are stronger, one said. Our fleets will be destroyed, another warned. This is not our war, a senator added. Outside the windows, the wind howled across Earth's battered surface. A reminder that humans were born on a world that demanded they fight for every inch. A junior officer, quiet and sharp-eyed, finally spoke. They asked for help, she said. Her voice trembled, but her words carried weight. They are alone. We know what that feels like. The room fell silent. Every head turned. Every mind weighed the truth in her words. Humans had survived storms that could tear cities apart, diseases that could kill millions, predators that could shred a person in seconds. Their world did not forgive weakness. Survival was written into their bones. And now, that instinct reached outward, across the stars. No one spoke at first. The Council of Earth's military and civilian leaders looked at one another. Some were hesitant. Some were afraid. But the fear of doing nothing, of letting a civilization die alone, was sharper. It cut deeper. Finally, the veteran commander who had first spoken of Keller's plea leaned forward. We don't negotiate, he said. We don't care about politics or strategy right now. Someone is asking for help. That alone is enough. Plans began forming. Ships were prepared. Old battleships, refitted and reinforced, hummed with life in dry docks. Freighters were armed and retrofitted to carry troops and supplies. Medical ships loaded with doctors, nurses, and emergency equipment were readied. Civilian volunteers offered themselves for the mission. Engineers, scientists, and even farmers insisted on going. Everyone wanted to be part of the rescue. The galaxy watched, in disbelief, as Earth's leaders made the decision. The Aurelian Empire had refused. The Zelf Union had refused. Even the Galactic Council had turned its gaze elsewhere. But the humans, the Deathworlders, had said yes. Aboard the first fleet of ships leaving Earth's orbit, the commander spoke over the comms. His voice was calm but steady. We are going to Keller. We do not know what we will face, but we know what it means to be alone. Hold on. We are coming. In the dark void between stars, the ships moved like a single living thing. Engines flared against the blackness, carrying human determination and stubbornness. Every pilot, soldier, and medic carried fear but also courage. They did not believe they were heroes. They did not believe they could win. They only knew that leaving a world to die when it cried for help was something they could never accept. As the fleet passed the edge of the solar system, a young pilot looked out at the stars. He thought of Keller, burning and broken. He thought of children huddled in shelters and of parents holding them close. And he whispered, almost to himself, "No one faces the dark alone." The fleet moved on, leaving Earth behind but carrying its spirit. The Deathworlders were going to war, not for glory, not for power, but because it was the right thing to do. That simple choice, made in the quiet of a council room, would echo across the galaxy in ways no one could yet imagine. Somewhere, on Keller, the signal still pulsed, waiting for an answer. Now finally, it had one. The first human ships appeared at Keller's orbit before dawn. The planet was barely recognizable. Cities that once glimmered with light now smoldered in shades of gray and red. Smoke rose in thick columns, curling into the thin atmosphere. Oceans boiled near industrial zones, and scattered fires burned in forests that had survived centuries. From orbit, the world looked like it was dying, but humans had never been afraid of dying worlds. On the bridge of the flagship, Commander Reyes stared at the holographic map. Red dots marked enemy positions. Keller's defenses were almost non-existent. Civilian convoys drifted aimlessly in orbit, shields flickering, engines failing. Every calculation told them to retreat. Every analysis warned them to turn back. But the commander did not hesitate. "We go in," he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of conviction, not fear. "No one deserves to be left alone." The Varn fleet noticed the human ships immediately. Their scanners calculated the odds. The vessels were old by modern standards, weapons overheating, armor uneven, systems patched with makeshift repairs. They assumed victory would be effortless. But the humans did not pause. They did not falter. The first strike came unexpectedly. Human frigates darted like hawks, weaving between Varn cruisers. Railguns fired, missiles streaked like comets, and point defense systems lit the void with flashes of fire. Even when a ship took a hit, it kept moving, improvising, adapting. Small craft darted into impossible angles, sacrificing themselves to save convoys, to block enemy fire, to draw attention away from civilians. On Keller's surface, the people had gathered in shelters, their eyes wide, ears straining for the sounds of their saviors. Through the smoke, they saw the distant glimmer of human ships firing into the void. Their first tears were ones of disbelief. Had anyone really come? They thought they were alone. Now hope burned brighter than any fire on them. Explosions shook the orbiting refugee convoys. A human pilot shouted over the com, his voice raw. "Hold on, we've got you." His words echoed across frequencies, reaching frightened children and exhausted parents alike. Every strike carried both fury and protection. Humans had learned to survive a hostile world. They knew the cost of fear, and they refused to let it consume anyone else. The Varn recalculated. They had never met opponents like this. Their logic engines could not understand the human tenacity. The ships pressed on, shields flaring, damage mounting, but their formations never broke. Their purpose was singular: protect the helpless, defend the innocent. No retreat. No surrender. Only fight. Only hope amid the chaos. A young human medic watched from a medical frigate as one of the refugee transports took a direct hit. She gasped. People screamed. Without hesitation, she piloted a small shuttle into the debris, scooping survivors from the wreckage and guiding them to safety. Around her, colleagues did the same. The universe had taught them that survival required courage, not caution. Back in orbit, Commander Reyes watched the Varn cruiser explode into fragments. He allowed himself a brief smile, quickly replaced by focus. There were hundreds more enemies, and Keller's people were still in danger. But every explosion, every rescue, every desperate maneuver reinforced one truth: humans had come. The galaxy had turned its back, but Earth's people had not. On the planet below, fires reflected in tear-filled eyes. Children clutched one another. Parents whispered prayers, not just to gods, but to the humans who had arrived. The message had been heard. The universe had ignored them. But the Deathworlders had not. The first battle was only the beginning. Humanity had arrived in fire, and the fire was not just weapons, it was determination, stubbornness, and compassion burning brighter than any star in the sky. Keller's people felt it. Even in the shadow of destruction, hope now had a shape. The Varn had assumed weakness. They had calculated death, but they had underestimated what it meant to fight for others. To risk everything for those who could not defend themselves. In the silence between bursts of cannon fire, Keller's Sittons whispered the words that would never leave them. They came. They really came. And somewhere in the void, the human fleet surged forward. Engines flaring, hearts burning. ready to face the storm of death without faltering. The human ships did not stay in orbit. They descended. Through fire and smoke, through the ruins of shattered cities, the Deathworlders moved like ghosts of hope. Every landing was a risk. Enemy fire raked the streets, buildings collapsed around them, and the ground itself shook from explosions. Yet, the humans pressed on, carrying with them what no calculations could predict: courage, stubbornness, and care for others. On Keller's surface, the devastation was unimaginable. Homes had crumbled into rubble. Parks were scorched. Schools were nothing more than smoking ruins. Streets were littered with debris, and every corner seemed to hide danger. Refugees huddled in basements and tunnels, pale faces pressed against walls, shaking with fear. The smell of smoke and burned metal filled the air. Human soldiers moved among them, carrying children, guiding the elderly, helping the injured. Some wore heavy armor, some carried nothing more than first aid kits and rifles, but all of them acted with one purpose: protect the helpless. "Stay with me," a soldier said softly to a trembling girl, lifting her into his arms. "You're safe now. You're not alone." She clutched his neck, tears mixing with dust and ash, and whispered, "You came. You really came." Every step was dangerous. Varn patrols still moved in the skies above, dropping strikes without warning. Mines and traps had been left in streets and alleys. Yet the humans never hesitated. When a bridge collapsed under a convoy of civilians, human engineers raced forward, constructing a makeshift crossing while under fire. When a building threatened to fall on trapped families, soldiers risked their lives to pull survivors from the rubble. Every act carried risk, yet every act saved lives. Meanwhile, in the orbiting fleet, medical ships worked tirelessly. Doctors, nurses, and volunteers moved between transports, treating burns, fractures, and injuries from the chaos. A young doctor held a child with a broken leg, whispering words of comfort in an alien tongue. She had no translator, no time to think, yet the child understood. Pain did not need language. Compassion did. Even the civilians aboard Earth's ships joined the effort. Engineers repaired shields while under fire. Farmers and volunteers helped load supplies into transports. Mechanics climbed the hulls of damaged vessels to restore engines. Everyone contributed. Everyone fought, not with hatred, but with determination to save lives. The Varn began to adjust their attacks. They targeted civilians, trying to break human resolve. But the humans responded with fury, not cruelty, not revenge, but protective rage. They blocked fire with shields, drew enemy attention, and held the line until the last refugees could escape. "No one dies today," a commander shouted into the comms, voice cracking with exhaustion and emotion. Losses came quickly. Ships burned, soldiers fell, medical teams were injured. But still, humans carried on. Every life saved mattered. Every child rescued, every elder guided to safety was a victory. They treated the wounded with the same care they would show their own, even when exhaustion clawed at their limbs. By nightfall, Keller's surface was scarred but alive. Fires still burned in distant districts, and enemy ships continued to patrol, but hope had returned. The people had seen humans move through chaos with impossible courage, sacrificing themselves for strangers. Some cried openly. Some knelt in silent gratitude. Every survivor carried the memory of human compassion etched into their hearts. Commander Reyes stood on the bridge of the flagship, watching the distant horizon. His ship was damaged, engines sputtering, hull scorched. Crew members were tired beyond measure, but their eyes shone with determination. He spoke quietly into the comms. "We will not leave until every life is safe. That is our duty. That is why we came." And across Keller, those words spread through the survivors. They whispered them to children. They shared them with the injured. They repeated them in the quiet, in hope, in relief. They came. They stayed. They saved us. Even in the face of death, even surrounded by fire and despair, humans had proven something no calculation could predict. Compassion could be stronger than fear. Courage could outshine destruction. And when the galaxy refused to answer, the Deathworlders answered instead. The final battle began as the sun rose over Keller, casting a pale orange light over the ruined cities. Smoke still curled from the destroyed districts, and the air was thick with ash. The Varn fleet had regrouped, larger and more organized, determined to finish what they had started. Their ships moved in perfect formation, calculating every strike. They believed the humans would falter, that the Deathworlders would tire, that their determination would crumble. They were wrong. Human ships rose from the cities and orbit alike, battered but unbroken. Engines flared against the black of space as frigates and cruisers surged forward. Every weapon fired, every shield absorbed, every maneuver executed carried one unyielding purpose: protect the innocent. They did not fight for glory. They did not fight for power. They fought because no one had answered Keller's plea till now. On the ground, human squads moved with relentless precision. Soldiers carried civilians across streets torn by bombardment, dragging the injured through rubble and fire. Engineers rigged temporary bridges and walls to shield fleeing families. Medical teams treated the wounded under fire, refusing to leave anyone behind. Every person saved, every life preserved, was a small victory against a world determined to erase them. The Varn launched wave after wave of attacks. Explosions lit the skies. Buildings collapsed. Fire raged unchecked. Still, the humans pressed on. A young pilot guided a crippled transport through enemy fire, maneuvering with impossible skill as missiles tore past. Behind her, other ships covered her escape, taking hits meant for the refugees she carried. "Keep going," she shouted into the cum, voice trembling. "We're here. We've got you." In orbit, the flagship of Commander Reyes absorbed strike after strike. Shields flared, systems faltered, and alarms screamed endlessly. Yet the crew did not panic. Every officer, every pilot, every engineer worked with precision and determination, improvising repairs, rerouting power, and keeping the ship alive. The vessel moved like an extension of their will, a machine powered by human resolve. The Varn fleet, confident in their calculations, attempted to flank the humans. But the Deathworlders were unpredictable. Small craft swarmed, blocking fire, distracting enemy ships, and striking where no logic would predict. Larger human vessels adapted, ramming when necessary, using debris as shields, never retreating. Each loss only fueled the determination of those who remained. Above the ruins of Keller's capital, human soldiers reached the last shelters. Children huddled together, exhausted and terrified, when a soldier entered carrying water and food. She knelt before them, smiling despite sweat and grime. "You are safe now," she whispered. "We're here. We won't leave you." The children's trembling bodies slowly relaxed, tears running down their faces. They had seen the fire of destruction, and now they felt the warmth of protection. The tide began to turn. The Varn could not anticipate the human willingness to sacrifice everything for others. Ships that should have been destroyed remained in the fight. Troops that should have fled stood their ground. The Varn calculations did not account for love, compassion, or loyalty, the core of human survival. With each strike, the enemy faltered. Their formations cracked. Their perfectly organized attacks failed against unpredictable courage. Hours passed like days. Exhaustion clawed at the humans, yet they did not yield. Commander Reyes gave a simple order over the cums: "Push forward. Every life saved is a victory. Hold nothing back." And they did. Frigates ran damaged cruisers. Soldiers charged through fire to pull civilians to safety. Every act was small, yet together they became unstoppable. Finally, the Varn fleet began to break. Ships retreated in confusion. Their calculated attacks were ineffective. Every attempt to regain control failed. Commander Reyes watched from his bridge as the remaining enemy vessels turned away. Their once perfect strategy undone by something no calculation could predict: human determination. Keller was saved. The streets were still scarred, the cities still burned, but the people were alive. Families embraced. Children laughed through tears. Survivors fell to their knees, gazing at the sky where human ships hovered, engines glowing like the heartbeat of hope. Commander Reyes allowed himself a brief moment to breathe. "We did it," he said quietly. Around him, crew members whispered similar words, their voices heavy with exhaustion and relief. They had come as strangers. They had fought as Deathworlders. And now they had delivered hope where none existed. On Keller, the message from the survivors was simple and clear. They did not leave. They stayed. They saved us. Across the galaxy, that truth would ripple far and wide. Humans had fought like no one else would, not for conquest, not for profit, but for compassion. And the galaxy would never forget the day the Deathworlders answered a cry in the dark. The battle was over, but Keller was far from safe. Smoke still rose from the ruins. Fires flickered in distant districts. Buildings lay shattered like broken teeth across the cities. Yet, amid the destruction, life had returned. Human medics and engineers moved tirelessly among the survivors, their presence a steady heartbeat in a world that had almost died. On the streets, children clutched hands and parents hugged them tightly. Some had lost everything, but they were alive. Every rescued family, every recovered child, became proof that hope could survive even the darkest nights. A young soldier carried a small boy through a ruined square. The boy's eyes were wide with wonder and relief. "You came," he whispered, voice trembling. "You really came." The soldier smiled through sweat and grime. "We promised we would. And we always keep our promises." Humans worked in every corner. They cleared rubble, carried water, set up temporary shelters, and treated injuries with skill and care. They spoke to Calarians in the few words they knew, but the language of compassion needed no translation. A doctor comforted a crying mother while bandaging her wounded daughter. Engineers repaired broken transport vehicles. Pilots ferried supplies to the farthest towns. Every action carried one unspoken message: you are not alone. Even as they worked, the humans did not forget their fallen. They buried their own alongside Calarians, marking graves with simple stones or messages of hope. They mourned silently, but never stopped. To them, every life saved mattered as much as the life they had lost. Every death was a reminder of the cost, but also of the choice they had made, to answer the call when no one else would. The Galactic Council had finally taken notice. Sensors across the galaxy recorded the human fleet moving through orbit, rescuing civilians, stabilizing cities, and fighting off the last scattered enemy patrols. The Council's representatives watched in disbelief. Analysts calculated numbers, strategists recalculated strategies, and diplomats argued quietly. But no calculation could capture what they saw. Humans had acted not for reward, not for fame, not for control. They had acted for others. A Calarian elder stood on the steps of a ruined council building, overlooking the clearing where humans treated the wounded. His voice shook as he spoke to the survivors gathered nearby. "We called for help, and no one came. No one answered. Except them. Only the Deathworlders came." His words echoed through the streets. Children repeated them in awe. Adults whispered them to one another, relief and gratitude heavy in their voices. The message traveled beyond Kalar, beyond the system, carried on communications and transmissions. Everywhere the humans went, they inspired hope. People who had given up on the galaxy began to dream again. Soldiers who had fled before now stood taller. Children laughed amid the rubble. Farmers and merchants began to plan rebuilding, encouraged by the example of those who had risked everything to save them. Keller would rise again, stronger, because someone had refused to leave it behind. For the humans, there was no celebration. They repaired, healed, and moved quietly among the people. They did not boast of bravery. They did not demand thanks. They simply did what they had always done: fight when it was necessary, protect when no one else would, and endure no matter the cost. Every smile they inspired, every life they saved, was enough. Commander Reyes watched from the flagship as Keller's sun set behind the horizon. The streets glowed faintly with fires that would soon be extinguished. Survivors moved among humans and fellow Kellerians, building temporary homes, sharing food, comforting one another. The commander allowed himself a quiet thought. This is why we came. This is why we survive. Not for glory, but so no one faces the dark alone. As the galaxy recorded the events of Keller, it could not ignore them. Humans had changed the equation. They had proven that courage could not be measured in firepower alone, that compassion could not be calculated in strategy sheets. A civilization's worth was not in its fleets or weapons, but in the hearts of those who would act when others refused. Across the universe, whispers began to spread. Send a signal. Someone will come. The Deathworlders will answer. And for Keller, that answer had arrived. Their world had been saved not by chance, not by treaty, but by the determination and humanity of strangers, who risked everything for those who could not defend themselves. The galaxy had seen it. The galaxy had understood. Years passed, but Keller never forgot. The scars of war remained on the planet: crumbling buildings, charred forests, and fields that would take decades to heal. Yet the people of Keller walked among the ruins with heads held high. They had survived because someone had come when no one else would. The memory of human ships streaking across their skies, engines glowing like streaks of hope, stayed alive in every heart. Humans did not stay for fame or reward. Once the last survivors were safe, once the wounded were healed, once the Varn had fled beyond the system, they prepared to leave. Ships repaired themselves, crews rested briefly, and then they returned to the void from which they had come. Yet the legacy they left behind was larger than any fleet, larger than any weapon. It was hope. It was courage. It was the knowledge that someone, somewhere, would answer a call for help. Keller's leaders gathered with the humans one last time. Tears streaked faces etched with exhaustion and grief. A counselor spoke for the survivors. We sent a signal into the darkness. We prayed for help. No one answered. Except you. Only the Deathworlders came. The human commander, weary and bruised, simply nodded. He said nothing grand. He needed no praise. They had done what they had always done, answered the call when it mattered most. Across the galaxy, word of the event spread. Scholars and analysts debated the implications. Diplomats whispered it in chambers. Traders carried the story along shipping routes. The humans were feared by some for their stubborn courage, respected by all for their actions. They were not perfect. They did not claim heroism. But their actions spoke louder than words. When others faltered, when the galaxy turned away, they stood firm. For Keller, life slowly returned to the cities. Farmers replanted crops, builders reconstructed homes, and children ran through streets that had once been war zones. Everywhere, humans left a mark, not just by helping, but by showing what it meant to care for strangers. Parents told their children stories of the Deathworlders who came in fire and smoke, who risked everything to save lives that were not their own. Remember, they said, someone will always answer if you dare to hope. Even decades later, the phrase became legend. Across star systems, when colonies were threatened by pirates, when trade routes were cut by storms, when distant worlds sent weak cries for help, someone whispered, "Send the message to Earth." It was no longer a call to war. It was a call to courage, a test of heart, a reminder that in the galaxy, there were those who would fight not for power, But for life itself, humans never sought recognition. They never demanded thanks. Their fleets continued to patrol the borders of known space, respond to emergencies,